The haemophilia blood product scandal contains a number of lies, layered upon lies. So let's start off with the idea that this was an accident. Back in 1942, I believe, during World War II, a group of prisoners in the UK were used for plasma pool experiments. These experiments were designed, supposedly, to bring about a better way of treating the injured from war in the field. All very laudable. All the men died of hepatitis, became ill, became sick. So they had instant proof that blood pooling was highly dangerous. So we spool forward a bit and we come to the invention in '58 of cryoprecipitate. Now, initially cryoprecipitate was probably relatively safe because the donor pool would involve volunteers because it was research. The moment that becomes corrupted by the use of paid donors, prison plasma, you lose that volunteer bit, you create that economic dependency in areas where small amounts of money are fortunes. People will lie, and the only protection we had was those people telling the truth. They knew that. It wasn't in their commercial interest to do bugger all about it. A barrel of blood was worth more than a barrel of oil. It still is. It was just economics, business. So we spool forward again, we get to '65. Now in '65 the British government did something very interesting with the other major plasma pool product. Primarily because they knew that hepatitis was a high risk if you pooled. Now that was to heat treat all albumin. Now they say that they didn't heat treat blood or plasma products at this point because they didn't have a way of doing it. The truth is they didn't put any money into researching it. When they did in '82 it happened very quickly. So by the time we get to '65 we've got a position where the plasma pools that are used for haemophiliacs and the plasma pools that are being used for everybody else are significantly differentiated. Spool forward to '68 and the Medicines Act and the significant amount of traffic letter-wise between the British government, blood transfusion and various consultants, potential liabilities coming out of the Act and how it would hamper their work. All this time nobody's telling us anything, nobody's publishing anything in a way that we could access it. Then you get to the 1970s. We start to move to the point where they're looking to produce high volumes of plasma. And when you get into the 70s it gets quite interesting because a number of things are going on at the same time. All blood transfusion directors were required to contain a record within their department which was called the hepatitis book. These hepatitis books would have allowed each plasma area blood transfusion director to identify groups of donors that were giving them problems, i.e. high volumes of hepatitis that they had to put into their hepatitis books. So by the time we get to '75 there's no doubt that most centre directors should have been aware, if they were collecting from prisons, that there was a higher volume of returns of hepatitis within that, because at this point we're pretty much aware that hepatitis mid-70s in prisons was running at about 66%. Another group of people who might have been volunteer donors, but if I was sitting in a British prison banged up for 23 hours a day and somebody told me I could have tea, a biscuit, all for giving a pint of blood, I'd have done it. And kept my mouth shut about maybe what I was injecting, what I was shagging. So by the time we get to '75 and they've done an autopsy on haemophiliac and proved that non-A, non-B hepatitis was his cause of death through liver cirrhosis, we get into this very strange era where some very nasty little things happen. Some of those nasty little things involve the bit I've just explained about blood transfusion, realising that the plasma you're getting from various areas is not very good. It would have been only human, and it appears to have happened when you start studying the records, to send the lower quality plasma for processing in some obscure hope that it would destroy the hepatitis. A hope that seems to have been not only nonsense, but one that really was just the public face of what was going on, because a number of people had turned up at this time. It's worth noting that all haemophilia centre directors at this point in time were pathologists, not haematologists. Quite an important note, because most of them come to us through the research work that they did in hepatitis, etc. We become an attractive group of people. Now, this is why I've used the line that haemophiliacs at best were like babies who were made to play in a motorway by men in white coats, who then sought praise and adoration and payment for stitching them back together again, and made millions on the back of how neat their stitches were. Let's not understate the true level of exploitation here. It's worse than that, because there's serious questions about how they actually identified heat treatment as AIDS freeing in haemophilia. There's serious questions about the ethical responses at various points, and there appears to have been at least 3 double-blind trials that I can identify from the fragments of evidence that still exist. There should be a national public inquiry into all of this. It's an absolute and total scandal. The exploitation of other blood victims of contaminated blood to try and obfuscate your way out of the truth about what really happened to haemophiliacs, about how they've been exploited since our birth by genetic definition,